It started as a typical day at school, or at least I thought it was typical. Chemistry class had always been challenging, but our new project, an experiment in genetic modification and hormone simulation, was supposed to be fascinating. Our teacher, Mr. Langford, had a reputation for pushing boundaries. I admired his brilliance, though some of his ideas were unconventional. "All right, class," he announced, his eyes gleaming behind thick glasses. "Today we'll test the effects of this compound on cellular behavior. Safety protocols are crucial. Follow instructions precisely." I was paired with two classmates and assigned to handle the preparation. The compound itself was strange, iridescent, almost glowing under the lab lights. It was supposed to mimic hormonal interactions on a cellular level. Exciting, yes, but the disclaimers made my stomach twist. "Just follow the steps," I reminded myself, trying to focus on the science. I didn't realize how quickly things would spiral. A moment of distraction, an accidental spill, a miscalculated dosage, and suddenly the experiment was active. There was a sharp hiss, the lights flickered, and an acrid smell filled the air. My body felt strange, tingly, almost as if every cell was awakening in the wrong way. Panic set in. My classmates screamed, and Mr. Langford barked instructions, but I barely registered them. My vision blurred, the lab spun, and I collapsed onto the floor. I could feel changes, subtle at first, then undeniable. My muscles loosened, my chest tightened differently, my frame shifted. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked, higher and softer than before. When I finally staggered to the mirror by the lab sink, the reflection that stared back was not mine. My face had softened, my hair longer and finer, my body smaller, more delicate. I was a girl. "Impossible," I whispered, trembling. "This can't be happening." Mr. Langford rushed over, panic etched across his face. "It shouldn't have. It's unstable. This compound, it's not meant for full human trials." He tried to calm me, but I barely heard him. My mind was a storm, shock, fear, disbelief, and an almost perverse curiosity. I didn't recognize my body, my voice, or the way I moved. Every step felt foreign, every gesture alien. By the end of the school day, I realized the full weight of the situation. The changes were not temporary, they were permanent, at least for now. I had to navigate the halls, face classmates, teachers, and the world as someone I didn't recognize. Every glance felt like a mirror reflecting loss and confusion. Every whisper felt magnified. The walk home from school felt surreal. Every reflection in a store window, every passing glance, reminded me that I was no longer who I had been. My old jeans felt wrong, my oversized hoodie swallowed me, and my long hair, now soft and flowing, brushed against my shoulders in ways that made me hyper-aware. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact, yet every step seemed to draw attention. When I entered my house, my family's reactions were a mix of shock and disbelief. My mom's mouth fell open, my dad's brow furrowed, and my younger sibling froze mid-step. "You're different," my mom whispered, voice trembling. I don't know how this happened," I stammered, my new voice soft and unfamiliar even to me. "It was the experiment." Over the next few days, school became a battlefield. Friends gawked, whispered, and some outright avoided me. Those who approached me stared a little too long, unsure how to react. Every interaction was a test of composure. I had to respond carefully, modulate my voice, and adjust gestures, all while grappling with the panic bubbling inside. Teachers treated me differently too. Some were cautious, unsure whether to reprimand or accommodate. Mr. Langford hovered nearby, apologetic yet strangely fascinated. "We'll figure this out," he murmured repeatedly, though the uncertainty in his eyes mirrored my own fears. Every day brought new challenges. Physical changes made basic activities feel foreign. Sitting at desks designed for my old frame was awkward. Sports, gym class, even simple walks down the hallway were exercises in adaptation. Clothes no longer fit, and I had to navigate unfamiliar body mechanics with every movement. Socially, I faced scrutiny I had never imagined. Boys I had known as friends looked at me with curiosity, or worse, awkward attraction. Girls seemed wary, unsure whether to accept me as one of them or to treat me as an outsider. Each interaction felt like navigating a minefield, and I constantly second-guessed every word, glance, and gesture. Home offered little reprieve. My parents tried to help, but their concern often felt like additional pressure. "You need to eat properly," my mom said one morning, fussing over my breakfast. "You need to rest, and we need to monitor everything." Even in my own home, I felt under observation, scrutinized for behavior, appearance, and emotional response. Nighttime became the hardest. Alone in my room, I faced the reflection that had replaced my own. I traced my fingers along the softer curves of my face, the delicate hands, the unfamiliar hips, and felt a wave of grief. My body was no longer mine, and the life I knew, my friends, my routines, my comfort, had been suspended in a haze of shock and adaptation. I began to experiment secretly with my new identity, testing how I could move, speak, and even dress to navigate this unfamiliar world. Every small success, walking confidently in a skirt, adjusting my voice for a conversation, responding gracefully to a compliment, felt like a victory. Yet the victories were tempered by fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of ridicule, and fear that I might never regain my old life. School, family, and social life blurred into a constant exercise of vigilance. Each day demanded awareness, improvisation, and emotional endurance. I had to monitor reactions, adapt behaviors, and conceal panic, all while wrestling with the existential dread of sudden transformation. Despite the fear, I noticed subtle shifts. Confidence crept in where panic had ruled. Moments of mastery, handling a tricky conversation, navigating a crowded hallway, or managing an awkward situation with grace, brought exhilaration. I realized that adapting to this new body required more than survival. It demanded creativity, intelligence, and resilience. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, yet more self-aware. The shock of transformation had forced me to confront vulnerabilities, insecurities, and limitations I hadn't previously acknowledged. I was learning to navigate a world that saw me differently, to assert control in situations that felt alien, and to discover strength in adaptation. I understood one crucial thing. Surviving this transformation required embracing not just the physical changes, but the social, emotional, and psychological dimensions of my new reality. Every interaction, every glance, every movement was now an opportunity to learn, adapt, and grow. And yet, beneath the surface, I felt a flicker of curiosity, an urge to explore the new identity, to understand what life as a girl could teach me, and to test the boundaries of my abilities. That curiosity would lead me into the next phase: secret exploration, self-discovery, and the personal growth that would define the rest of this extraordinary journey. After surviving the first week of school and family adjustments, I realized that the real work was private. Away from classmates, teachers, and the constant observation of my parents, I could finally explore what it truly meant to live in this new body. My room became a sanctuary and a laboratory of identity. The mirror, once a source of panic, became a tool for discovery. I studied my face from every angle, tracing the curves of my cheeks, the shape of my eyes, the subtle softness of my jawline. I tested smiles, tilts of the head, and gestures, analyzing how each movement altered perception. Slowly, the reflection became familiar. Not just foreign, but something I could manipulate, understand, and eventually embrace. Clothes were the first domain of experimentation. I had always worn casual, unremarkable outfits, but now skirts, blouses, and dresses hung in my wardrobe. At first, wearing them felt alien. Every step in a skirt reminded me of my new form. Every fitted top emphasized curves I had never noticed before. But gradually, I learned combinations that felt comfortable, flattering, and expressive. I experimented with colors, patterns, and textures, discovering how subtle choices could project confidence, poise, and personality. Makeup became an entirely new skill. I had dabbled in it before, but now it was essential. Foundations, blush, eyeliner, and lipstick weren't just tools. They were instruments of transformation. I practiced blending, contouring, and highlighting, learning to accentuate features while masking unfamiliarities. Each session brought frustration but also delight, as I discovered that skill and patience could make me look not just acceptable but strikingly beautiful. Voice was another frontier. I recorded myself speaking, listening carefully to pitch, tone, and cadence. I practiced reading aloud, modulating emotion, and conveying confidence. Slowly, my higher, softer voice began to feel natural. Conversations that once filled me with anxiety now became opportunities to practice poise and control. Gestures and posture demanded attention as well. I experimented with walking, sitting, and moving with elegance, learning how small adjustments could convey confidence, grace, and authority. A flick of the wrist, a tilt of the head, or the subtle arch of an eyebrow became tools for influence and self-expression. Gradually, I felt myself inhabiting this body fully, not just externally but internally. Beyond physical exploration, I tested behavioral patterns. I tried interacting with my family in ways that felt authentic yet aligned with my new identity. I experimented with communication, gentle but assertive, playful yet poised. I learned which strategies elicited positive reactions, which moments demanded caution, and which expressions could diffuse tension. I also created scenarios to test social situations. Alone at home, I simulated conversations with classmates, teachers, and friends, practicing responses, humor, and charm. Each small victory reinforced my confidence. I realized that mastering this new identity wasn't just about appearance. It was about understanding human interaction, influence, and perception. Journaling became an essential outlet. I documented successes, failures, observations, and experiments. Each entry helped me track growth, identify areas for improvement, and reflect on the emotional and psychological shifts I was undergoing. Patterns emerged. Moments of fear were often followed by breakthroughs in confidence. Hesitation gave way to poise. Self-consciousness transformed into agency. Some nights, I allowed myself to explore more daring aspects of this identity. I tried bold outfits, expressive makeup, and confident behavior, testing boundaries and discovering new strengths. Each experiment taught me resilience, the courage to take risks, accept mistakes, and learn from them. I discovered that empowerment came not just from external appearance, but from internal acceptance and the willingness to embrace change. By midweek, I began to notice profound shifts. My posture, gestures, and voice were no longer awkward. They flowed naturally. My confidence in interactions, both real and simulated, grew. I was learning to inhabit this body fully, understanding the subtle ways perception, expression, and identity intertwined. I also reflected on the teacher who had inadvertently transformed me. Mr. Langford had pushed boundaries without fully understanding consequences, but his experiment had forced me into growth I would never have sought voluntarily. The experience, though terrifying, had unlocked resilience, creativity, and self-awareness I hadn't known I possessed. Private exploration gave me not just skill but insight. I realized that identity was fluid, perception was powerful, and confidence could be cultivated through practice, awareness, and courage. I was no longer just reacting to circumstances. I was experimenting, learning, and evolving. By the end of this private journey, I felt a subtle but undeniable shift. The reflection in the mirror was no longer alien. It was a version of myself I could embrace, manipulate, and grow with. I had discovered not just adaptation but agency. I had learned to navigate my body, voice, appearance, and social presence. And I was beginning to understand that this journey was far from over. The real test lay ahead. Public interactions, social scrutiny, and ultimately, full acceptance of my transformed self. The day of the school science showcase arrived like a storm. The gymnasium was filled with students, teachers, and visiting families, all buzzing with excitement over experiments, displays, and awards. For me, it felt like a battlefield. Every step, every glance, every whisper carried the potential for exposure, judgment, and embarrassment. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that balanced elegance and confidence. A fitted skirt, a soft blouse, and subtle accessories that emphasized my transformation without drawing undue attention. My hair was styled neatly, makeup applied with care, and posture perfected in the mirror one last time. As I left my room, the reflection staring back was no longer foreign. It was powerful, poised, and ready to face the world. The first challenge came immediately. Students who had known me before stared in shock, some whispering, others wide-eyed with curiosity. Friends looked uncertain, hesitant to approach, while classmates I had barely interacted with now regarded me with fascination. My voice, steady and confident, carried as I introduced myself, engaged in conversation, and navigated the first few interactions. Each successful moment bolstered my courage. Then came the pinnacle of the showcase, presenting my project. Mr. Langford's experiment, the one that had changed me, was now displayed for everyone to observe. I stepped up, heart pounding but voice clear and firm. I explained the experiment, its goals, its unexpected results, and the personal transformation it had caused. I spoke candidly about fear, adaptation, and growth, turning vulnerability into a narrative of empowerment. Some students laughed nervously, some whispered, but many listened with rapt attention. Teachers exchanged glances, impressed with the poise and clarity I exhibited. Mr. Langford watched from the side, his expression unreadable, then slowly softened into a proud smile. "You've taken something chaotic and made it extraordinary," he said later quietly. The final test came when questions were asked. Some were curious, some pointed, some tinged with judgment. I answered each calmly, confidently, demonstrating not only knowledge but self-assurance. My voice, gestures, and expressions conveyed mastery, turning potential embarrassment into admiration. Each answer was an assertion. I was no longer just the subject of an accident. I was a participant in my own transformation, guiding others through what I had experienced. After the showcase, Mr. Langford approached me privately. His expression was a mixture of apology, awe, and admiration. "I never imagined anyone could adapt to what happened so completely," he admitted. "You've not only survived the experiment, you've turned it into growth, skill, and confidence." I realized then that the transformation wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychological, and social. I had faced fear, ridicule, and uncertainty and emerged stronger. The bet was no longer about the experiment itself. It was about mastery over self, resilience, and empowerment. I took a deep breath and reflected. The old life I had known, familiar, comfortable, predictable, was gone. In its place was a life that demanded awareness, adaptability, and courage. And yet it offered possibilities I had never imagined. Confidence, skill, poise, and an understanding of identity I could never have learned otherwise. Over the following days I continued to experiment with this identity, but now with public interactions included. School became a stage for mastery. Classmates who had once stared or whispered now treated me with respect, some with curiosity, others with admiration. Teachers observed a newfound maturity and poise. Even friends who had been hesitant began to include me, intrigued by the balance of vulnerability and strength I now embodied. Home life also shifted. My parents, initially anxious, began to see me as resilient, capable, and confident. Conversations became less about worry and more about guidance, support, and acknowledgement of growth. My body, my appearance, my mannerisms, all became extensions of a self I was learning to fully inhabit. I also discovered empowerment in small victories. Navigating hallways with confidence, responding to teasing with wit, embracing attention without fear, and projecting authority in subtle ways. Each moment reinforced the realization that identity is not fixed, that growth can arise from chaos, and that confidence is cultivated through experience, reflection, and courage. By the end of the month, the reflection in the mirror no longer startled me. I traced my hands, my curves, my facial features, and saw not just change but capability. I realized the experiment, though unintended, had unlocked potential I never knew I had. I was stronger, more aware, more adaptable, and, most importantly, in control of my path forward. In a final moment of reflection, I acknowledged the journey I had undertaken. Fear, panic, humiliation, adaptation, private exploration, and mastery. The transformation was no longer a curse, accident, or burden. It had become an opportunity, an awakening. I whispered softly to myself, full of conviction and newfound pride, "I am not defined by the accident, the experiment, or what others see. I am defined by how I rise, adapt, and embrace the strength within me." And with that, I stepped forward into the world, not as a victim of a failed experiment, but as a confident, empowered young woman ready to shape her own story, explore new possibilities, and embrace the extraordinary life that had unexpectedly become mine.